Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we're doing a chart breakdown of my piece Durango Drive. I wrote this for the Steven Feifke Big Band as a part of Steven's lead sheet to large ensemble coaching program. So as a part of that program, I got to record this with his band in New York City last year, and I'm super happy with how it came out. So I figured, let's go through it. Let's see how it came to be, break down some of the techniques I used to make the chart happen. If you want to listen to the whole chart, it's available in the description. I have a score and sound video and a studio recording video. We're going to go through this chart section by section. So if you want to hear the whole thing ahead of time, start there, come back here and see how it came to be. This chart I wrote in about 24 hours before heading to New York City. So a big part of Steven's lead sheet to large ensemble process is refining your process writing for a large ensemble, whether it's a big band or an orchestra or anything. And how do you get from a lead sheet ostensibly to an orchestration for big band? So we're going to go into some of that stuff now. All credit to Steven Feifke there. But employing that process allowed me to write a 4-minute piece the day before having to record it. I don't recommend doing it that way all the time, but sometimes life calls for that. And I was blown away with how the piece came out by the time I got to New York. So let's talk about that. Here we have the score, obviously. This is the same score in the score and sound video and the same score that we recorded from and the parts were extracted from in New York. So this is the thing. Now, if we take a look over here, this is a sketch. This is essentially a blown up lead sheet. All of the material in the score can be found somewhere in this sketch. So we're going to refer to both of these for clarity and context, but we're going to focus really on the score itself. But this is where everything starts. This is where all the ideas came from, whether they be orchestrational ideas, compositional ideas, everything starts here and then makes its way to the score, gets blown up at the end of the process. And it's a really, really efficient way to write. And let's take a listen to it. This is a 4-minute chart, swing 8 notes, hip hop groove at 138 beats per minute. Let's take a listen to what the band did with it. So that's the intro. We're hanging out in this C minor-ish harmonic landscape with a lot of modal interchange. Typically when I'm writing a chart, I start with the tune and work my way through the tune, then through solo sections and development sections and writer sections and shout choruses and all that stuff. And then I come back to the intro, the ending, and the interlude, because those are usually made up of the same material and usually derived from something I wrote later on in the chart. In this case, I started right at the beginning with this chord progression because I liked the way it sounded. I was sitting here at this keyboard and needed to start somewhere. So that's where we started. Let's take a listen to those. So most of these chords are fairly common in C minor, especially in the modern jazz language. You've got a C minor 7, your 1 minor 7. Then you've got a flat 2 major 7, modal interchange from Phrygian. E flat major 7 is your flat 3, back to D flat. We do it again, but then we land on E flat major 7, E flat minor 7, A flat major 7. Now, where did that come from? Pardon my piano skills here. Hard to do it sideways. Where did that come from? I wanted to write it. I liked the E flat sound. I liked the A flat sound. Something had to go in the middle. And the best way to deal with that for me in this case was the harmonic relationship of E flat minor 7 to A flat major 7. And that particular thing actually came from writing the head, writing the melody. When I first wrote this chord progression, this was E flat major 7, E flat major 7 to A flat major 7. But by the time I got to writing the head, and we'll get there in a second, there was something that made me change this chord to an E flat minor 7, which is an odd choice. Flat 3 minor 7 in minor isn't standard. I guess it's borrowed from Locrian. So we don't typically borrow from Locrian that often. But it's more about the relationship between the E flat minor 7 and the A flat major 7 than it is C minor 7 itself. It's not about it being in C minor. It's just a moment where those two chords had to work together, especially considering what happens next. Speaking of what happens next, let's take a listen. So that's the A section of our tune. The tune is kind of an A, B. They're about the same duration. And then we go off into some other material. So that's the tune written over this chord progression. And this is what it looks like in sketch form. This is our intro, right? This looks really dense because I wrote out the specific voicings that are in the playback. But these voicings were never written out for a piano player or a guitarist or anything. They're just for the playback, for this demonstration and kind of working out the chart. Then when we get to 21, that's where we just started. It starts the tune, tenor sax. The score is a transposing score. The sketch is in concert. So we're sitting in this C minor language pretty solidly. 1, 2. One, two. And that's where that E flat minor 7 becomes important, because I didn't want this phrase to be, that just sounded corny. So instead we get, and the best way to accompany that was, in my opinion, E flat minor 7 to A flat major 7. Then we get this unison counterline. And that split orchestration, you'll see I do this a lot in this chart. It's really common in contemporary big band writing to use split orchestration. Instead of alto 1 and alto 2 playing a thing, or alto 1, alto 2, tenor 2, to instead split that up into alto 2, tenor 2, trumpet 1 and 3, or maybe trumpets 2 and 4. It gives you a really interesting texture, I think, that breaks out of kind of the section writing of earlier styles of big band writing. I do a lot of that too, but I don't do it quite as much in this particular chart. We'll see a couple of examples of it, but a lot of this is the more contemporary approach there. Right here at 25, the bass trombone enters. We've only had 4 bars of the tune, and we're starting to support that tune off the bat. There's a couple of reasons for that. I knew the chart was going to be short. And I knew I wanted to start with 20 bars of rhythm section up front, which means that we have to move the energy pretty quickly once the head starts. Otherwise, we're looking at 3 minutes of development to get into an impact and then kind of taper that off. And then where do you fit a solo in there and how does that work? And I definitely wanted a solo. I knew the band was killer. So I started layering in the bass. It's identical to what the bassist is playing in the same octave. It's complete unison. So that's where we're at. And they continue laying down that bass line until into the next section. So those are our 3 basic components. As we continue through that phrase, we get a couple of call and response moments. So in the first section here, we've got just tenor, then we add bass trombone, then we layer in this unison counterline in the split orchestration towards the end of the phrase at the turnaround. And then we layer in, right? We layer in more unison counterlines underneath the melody. And then a call and response thing, trombones, back to our upper split orchestration being alto 2, tenor 2, trumpets 1 and 3. And then we start to split that orchestration even more. That was not notated in the sketch, by the way, but clearly is happening here in the score. Let's take a listen to what the counter melodic material sounds like on its own as an ensemble. So that is all of these guys. This is the counter melodic material and the bass line. Essentially, I'm looking to fill in gaps of the melody and move the energy forward to this more aggressive statement of the head. So let's take a listen to that with everybody here from the playback, at least all the horn players. Right. So there's a kind of rhythmic dissonance happening with this sustain and all of this counter melodic material being split up and hocketed like this. This is a technique I use a lot. And again, it appears in a much more simple form here on the sketch. To trade this material off between the sections underneath the sustain just provides a little bit of interest and intrigue in a moment that otherwise is just a crescendo. Which is very effective. But if you use only dynamics to build energy, you're going to have a really boring piece by the end. So using these hocketed rhythms underneath the melody, where the melody is a little bit less active, especially, this melody is less active than the counter melodies happening behind it. So filling in that space provides a nice bed for tenor to lay on top of, and then eventually we get some trumpets in on that melody as well. And then we get to this big tooty moment where everybody is playing one of 2 things, basically, in the band. Really 3 things. We have the bass line, just starting from the bottom. That's Barry and bass trombone at unison. No, at octave unison, excuse me. And then more split orchestration, alto 1 and 2, trumpet 1 and 3, trombone 3 are playing this counter melodic material that splits off into harmony. This is the first time that we're getting harmonized single ideas. So there's harmony here built into the melody and the counter melody. When you play them together, you get harmony. And then when you hock at this material, you get a little bit more dense harmony. But now we're just exploding out to what is the B section of the tune. And we're going to get there in a second. And I think you'll hear why I decided to start harmonizing here. Because we're still in our super conventional, or relatively conventional harmonic space here. It's all ternary harmony. They're built on seventh chords. There's not a whole lot that's living outside of that. But we're about to go somewhere a little bit different that relies on some other techniques. So by starting to harmonize this material, I'm giving us another opportunity to really lay into what this is and remember what this is, because we're going to hear this material again in the chart. This is not the last time we will hear this. But let's take a listen to that big concerted moment, just the horns here at a playback. And then we land, we cut off just before beat 4 here to get a nice breath, not only for the performers, but for us as listeners too, to kind of clear the palate before moving on to the next thing. And let's take a look at that one more time. And notice again, we're filling in the space where the melody is less active with more active counter melodic material. So this is concerted, and that's just in thirds and seconds. And then we get around the melody. All right, so we have 1, 2. Excuse me, 1, 2. Fourths, locking into unison. Thirds, with a D flat underneath it, right? So this counter melody is very, very close to the melody itself, and at times exceeds the range of that melody, or at least lands in unison with it, I think is the closest we get. And that provides a really interesting texture, and a texture that I like. Hearing the melody almost be overtaken by the counter melody, but it never quite takes the energy away unless I choose to kind of swap where the focus is. But it gets super close. It creates a nice dissonance that's still kind of within the language that we're using harmonically. And I tend to like that a lot. Now, let's listen to all of that material one more time, starting at the head, maybe. See if I can get that on playback. There's our bass trombone entrance. Split orchestration counter melody. And let's see where it goes. So that is the B section of the head, the B section of the tune. Let's take a look at that in sketch form. And this is the kind of writing where writing in sketch I find really helpful, because all of this, if we look at the score, starting at 41, all of this is split orchestration with the exception of some trombone stuff. So it can get really tricky to track where the lines are. Where in Sketch, it's all right there for us. This is, again, 3 unique components, and that's it. We harmonize some of those components, but it's at most 3 distinct ideas. Using those 3 distinct ideas, I can create a pretty dense texture. Let's take a listen to just these notes, just the pitches of what's going on here. And the piano player is playing almost all of it. So let's start there. Then we get a variation. And then we tag it. So this material came third in the piece. And it is our third major section. We have the intro, then the A section. Now we're at the B section, and it was written in that order. Where did it come from? I don't know. I needed a B section. So we came off this D flat major 7. Let's see if I can get a little bit closer there. So that is here. This is what we're hearing from the band. And then we break out of that. All right, so we're no longer in C minor, really. And we're no longer really in ternary harmony land. We're not in harmony in thirds land necessarily. We have 3 notes here, 3 distinct pitches, with the exception of a couple impact moments. And those pitches are rarely the guide tones in the bass, right? It's not clear-cut harmony. You're not always hearing the 3rd. You're not always hearing the 7th. You're not always hearing exactly what the quality of the chord is. It's more about the individual lines being heard. And those lines, once again, are our melody, our bass, and our counterline in between the 2. And between all 3 of them, I think the harmony is fairly clear, but I didn't conceive of it in thinking about chords. I was really thinking about intervallic relationships. I wrote this D. I figured out that we were going to be in D something for this bar, and then I wrote the first lick of the melody here, and then filled in bass relationships that I thought were interesting. So this E flat against the A flat, that's kind of a sus sound-ish. This B flat against the A flat here, that's could be a minor 7th sound, could be a dominant 7 sound. And by the time we get the counter line with that, it's pretty clear that that's a dominant 7 sound, but not exactly, because we don't hear all of that at the same time. And the rhythm section isn't comping. The rhythm section is playing the pitches, right? The guitar is playing the melody. The piano is playing all 3, the melody, the counterline, and the bass line, and the bass is playing the notated bass line. So this is all super prescriptive. I want these exact notes. And I've written even more notes for the guitar here in some of those harmonized impact moments. So if we take another look there, even these broken out harmonized moments aren't necessarily like here in bar 44, we've got a G flat. That's a pretty clear sound, pretty clear dominant sound, but then what is this? It's kind of unclear. So I enjoy working in that space. I enjoy hearing the 2 lines against each other. Now let's hear just the melody and the bass line here and see how it comes out. What information do we have? and we'll take everybody playing the bass line and everybody playing the melody as I can identify it. Oops. So the melody starts here on beat 2 of the bar. We're going to ignore the rhythm section for now. All right, so let's just start with that. That's how that came to be. The melody came first, and then the bass relationship, the intervallic relationship, what I wanted to feel under the melody came next. Then we incorporate this counter line. And what is the counter line doing? What's the point? To provide interest, to provide energy, to get us closer to the next section of the piece and provide a nice foundation for this moment. Let's hear all the horns playing that. This is, again, really split orchestration. So alto 1, tenor 1, trumpet 2, trumpet 4 playing the melody. Alto 2, tenor 2, trumpet 1, trumpet 3, and trombones playing the counter melody. And I can create a lot of density. Let's see if this made it into this kind of reduction. Yeah, it did. Okay. So not entirely. I can, some stuff gets lost in the sketch because it's just too complex to notate out. But this bar in particular, if you take a listen, and if we add everybody else into that, there's kind of a rhythmic dissonance happening. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and down here, 3, 4 and everybody plays on the end of 4 in that counterline stuff. By using that rhythmic dissonance, and again, it's not super clear here. Where are we? There we are. By getting that rhythmic dissonance, we're providing interest, changing where the listener is focused, because it's happening in different sections. It's happening in different places of the mix. Let's take a listen to that section one more time on the recording. Let's see if we can get that. There's that moment. So there's that moment of rhythmic dissonance. I pointed it out as we were going through it. B, ba, D, 4, and 2, and 3, 4, and. It kind of changes. It's a composite. It's a compound line. It's one line. But it's orchestrated to interlock and hock it differently. It's one line split out. That's a really great technique. I first learned that from Nicholas Urey, phenomenal arranger and professor, who looked at something that I had written, and it was this really long line. It was a bass line for a chart. And he said, well, why don't you just grab part of it and put it in the bari sax and grab the other part and put it in the bass trombone? And we'll look at a moment where that exact thing happened in this chart. But that's super effective for counterline material too, and even melodic material. It's a little bit trickier with melodic material. You have to be careful how you treat it. Otherwise, you might lose the melody. You might not point the focus in the right direction. But by hocketing these two moments, while the melody is sustaining, the melody is not active here. It's just going. I can point the focus where I really want it, which is everybody else in the band. And then by the time we get here at bar 57, we're back on the melody, right? Next comes a solo section, a phenomenal solo from our tenor player. And let's take a listen to that. Cool. So starting right there, where did this material come from? This is all just D minor. This material came from the tag right here. That's where I got it from. It felt like a natural way to end this phrase. So I put it in there, and then we land here, and I created this this groove with the piano and the bass, all kind of fourths based. And the tenor has this notated in their part. 3 and 4 and 2, 1 and 3 and 4, just so they know what's going on behind them. And if they want to play against that, they can. If they want to just blow, they can. Then the trombones come in fourths. I don't typically use this kind of voicing. This is a 2 and 2. So trombone 1 and 2 are both on this C. Trombone 3 and bass trombone are hitting this F. And then they all rotate down. A, D, D. Bass trombone gets an extra note here because they are awesome. The bass trombonist here was Jennifer Wharton, and she's phenomenal. And I thought this was kind of a cool gesture. And if I was ever going to write something like this, this is the opportunity to do it. So when you hear the trombone ensemble, you get the bass as well as this counter melodic material. So using them in two ways at the same time is really fun. And again, this kind of over the bar line, hocketed rhythmic pattern between the piano and the bass just gets extrapolated out into this. This is just an inverted voicing of this, essentially. Instead of it being a 3-note voicings in fourths, it's a 2-note voicings in fourths. Rotated down. So this F, if we were looking at it in the sketch, let's find it. So this is the rhythm section part. And this is the trombone part. It's sitting right underneath what the piano player is playing and overlapping on middle C. And then we move out of this material, right? We crescendo up in the rhythm section to mezzo forte from the mezzo piano that we've been at. And we land on what looks like new material, but it's not. This is a direct chord progression. This is a direct rip of the chord progression from the beginning of the tune, just brought up a whole step. So instead of being C minor 7 to D flat major 7, it's D minor 7, E flat major 7, F major 7, E flat major 7. Same language, same world, just in a different key. Why? Because this stuff is in D minor. So, and really the B section of the tune kind of led us there. So now let's just bring it up. It made sense in the moment, and it was about efficiency of material. I had already written something that I really liked at the beginning of the chart, and I needed more material. So I went back to what I'd already written in the chart and tried to develop it in a different way. First of all, we're not just hearing it as the head. Now we're hearing it as the bed for a solo section, which is what you would expect from the head anyway. It was just, preceded by this D minor vamp material. So we kind of allied the sections here. We end the head with this D minor vamp. Then we get the D minor vamp for, what looks like 16 bars to me. And it is 16 bars. And then we land on the chord progression from the head again, from the first part of the head. So let's see if I can grab this part of the solo again. So now we're back on this kind of subdominant modal interchange chord progression from the beginning, just in D minor instead of C minor. Same technique as the beginning of the tune, right? If we look back to the first melody introduction here, what's the first element we get? The bass. In that case, bass trombone. Now over here, first element we get is bari sax. Now we're going to do that compound orchestration that I was discussing earlier, where the first time I kind of employed a technique was like this. Say the line looked like this, was to take it and split it up, put it here instead. Just provides orchestrational color. When you hear it on the recording, they're happening in different parts of the room, and they're mixed to different parts of the sonic landscape. So just draws the ear differently. I had originally written it like this. So that's what you hear on the recording, but I changed it after the recording because by having them at octave unison, it kind of takes you out of that compound line moment. It's a little bit too different for my taste. So I brought the bass trombone back up in this revision of the score. This is actually the only change that wasn't an engraving mistake. The only thing that's different from the score that we used in New York. By keeping it in the same octave, now I know it's a much more convincing compound line orchestrational move. And then I put them together at the end because now we're going to ramp up the energy just a little bit. We're going to get some more backgrounds. These are the first real backgrounds that we're getting aside from that trombone thing, a couple of bars earlier. So we're here. Now we get the bass trombone, both of them. We're moving the energy. So, I think this section is really cool. These 26 bars, these 16-ish bars, are my favorite of the piece, really, because it comes back to that concept of efficiency in the material that I've written. These backgrounds obviously are very easy. They're ripped from the bass line. Great. These backgrounds are not ripped from the bass line. They're ripped from the melody at the beginning of the tune. and then orchestrated in a kind of unique way. So this started as 1, 2, or really it started as. Now, how did we start the tune? So it's using that 1, 2, 3, and 4 and motif to write some backgrounds. Now, this could look like this. Let's just do this. This could look like this and would be an incredibly convincing background line. And with the bass, that'd be fine. But instead, again, we're using some rhythmic dissonances, leaving trumpet 4 on this E, concert D, and adding this F in trumpet 3 to get not only a rhythmic dissonance, but also a harmonic dissonance. All right, that's a really, really dense sound that I enjoy, but it's really clear what's happening, even though it's dense, because of the top line. It only works because this is a melody. Might be a basic one, but it's very effective for what it is that I'm trying to do and staying out of the way of the tenor soloist. Then we get a unison moment. Yabba-dabba-da-da. But this line is really this. This is what this line was conceived as. Actually, this. It's just getting more complicated as we go along here. So that's how it was conceived, but it's obviously not how it's presented. This is, again, using kind of a compound line technique, using that rhythmic dissonance, changing the intervallic relationships between these notes underneath a sustain, much like we did in the B section of the head, right? And it creates a really, really dense sound. Let's see if we can grab that out of the recording again. So you hear it popping out of different members of the trumpet section, which is exactly what I was going for. Same technique that we used over here, just a tad more complex, especially with it happening in between this sustained B flat. We're again calling on that concept from earlier of weaving the counterline up to the melody, and in this case, exceeding it and then bringing it back down if we think about this as a melody line, which I think it is. Again, a simple one, but effective. And then we get some pads in the trombone. Pretty conventional voicings. Thirds, this is just an F triad over D, a big D minor 7 spread voicing. Excuse me. Then we hear E flat, building it down. Kind of an E flat major 13 sound. And then another voicing, another triad voicing, upper structure triad, A minor over F. Excuse me, where are we at there? Man, we're getting low for the bass trombone. Then we get D minor over B flat, C7. This is shell voicing pretty much. E flat major 7. Keep that top note, and it's the same E flat major 7 voicing as before. And if we check out the sketch, where are we at? We're at around bar 90, right? Yeah, so that's bar 98. Let's check out the sketch for bar 98 and see what that looks like. This looks super thick because we have an octave unison bass line happening underneath it. but these are super conventional voicings. And the same thing from earlier is happening up in the saxophone section and trumpet section. Again, we're hocketing that line. And we're adding now I have one less voice to work with here, so I couldn't quite orchestrate this the same way, but it's the same effect because I wanted unison trumpets here. Now, where did that material come from? That material came from here. It's the same thing. And I believe these are harmonized the same way. Yeah, so it's verbatim from the end of the B section there. And then we tag it just like we did in the B section. Tenor's still blowing over this. And where do we go next? So with this next section, as you heard, it is a verbatim recap from the earlier B section. So we come out of that solo using all the material from the A section, then into the B section. So where do we go from there? Let's go back to the B. It's a short chart. And this section was groovy and I thought it was cool. So let's hear it again. And then we tag it almost identically to the way that we did before. But we just sustain it a little bit, allow the energy to come down. And then we see the first real conventional saxophone writing in the chart. So these are just conventional voicings with the bass underneath it. So it's just technically a spread voicing. And it does the job. It does exactly what I'm trying to do. And then the trumpets come in and play this. And they're playing an upper structure triad on the, over the bass. So they're playing an upper structure on the E flat major 7. And that upper structure would be, let me get my transposing brain on here. That's a C minor 7. It's really a C minor 9. With an 11. So they're playing really a B flat add 9 chord over this E flat. With the saxophones playing their big spread voicing, which is playing this, and the Barry's playing that. My hands are not quite. Ooh. Excuse me. Sustain pedal's not working today. There we go. And the trumpets are playing in between that. That's nice. So it's just a nice way to end the chart, I think. Keeping it pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Again, trying to use as much economy and efficiency in the material that I've already written. The chart had to be written by the time I got to New York City. So using as much of that material as possible was super effective in this case. And the most effective example that I've experienced writing my own pieces of reusing, developing, changing the presentation of material to create a compelling work. So let's listen to that ending one more time coming out of the solo. Let's back it up. Just a smidge. So we're in here. So this chart is really simple. If you think about the components used, we have this intro, which develops directly into the A section of the head, the B section of the head, this little tag on the B section, this D minor vamp. The solo section further develops that D minor vamp. Then we're back to the A section, basically just in a new key, kind of A prime, into the B section in the original key in the solo. And then we're here. We play a development of the B almost verbatim. The only thing that changes is a little bit of orchestrational color. And then we end with a development from the beginning. This is the same way the chart started, just in a different key. And then this material is taken from the B section. Let's add the guitar into this as well. So there isn't a whole lot of stuff in here. It's 3 main components developed into 4 minutes of music. And all using that process of starting from a lead sheet, essentially blowing it up to the big band, and compartmentalizing every decision to its own stage. So the lead sheet is the compositional stage. Then we can make orchestrational decisions while we're composing or afterwards, if you like, as to who plays this material. Then you blow it up to the big band and really get into the nitty gritty of who's playing what, how long are they playing each of these durations, where are the cutoffs. That's something we can dig into in another video, because that's a whole kind of set of material in itself. But that's it. That's all it really takes. Write some stuff, hopefully that you like, develop that stuff, make it go from beginning to end in the lead sheet the way that you want it to, and then blow it up for the big band. That's kind of it. It's a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun as well. And I'm really happy with the piece and how it came out. I hope you enjoy the piece as well. If you do, again, you can go watch the studio video where you can see all of the wonderful performers, or the score and sound video where you can listen to the recording all the way through with the score as presented here. It's just blown up in a different format, but it's the same score. Huge thank you to Steven Feifke and his fantastic band, as well as Nolan Teese, who did the engineering at Bunker, and Daryl Darlington, who did the mixing and mastering. Just did a fantastic job. And yeah, this is how I went about writing this piece and how I go about writing most pieces from this point on. So I hope you enjoyed. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments down below. And I'll see you next time.